Great. All right. Okay, well, let us go ahead and jump in because we've got lots of announcements and lots of good stuff before we jump into Zodiac. So great to see you all, and thank you once again for joining me and Darnice tonight. And again, it's always a pleasure having Darnice to moderate for me and get me out of big trouble that I normally get in. All right, let's jump into Zodiac. So this movie is based on the actual murders in the California Bay Area during the late 1960s and 70s, early 70s. David Fincher's Zodiac is one of the most disturbing mainstream films of the past 20 years. And not only because of the murders, there's other things that we'll get to in just a few moments. The film is based on two books by Robert Graysmith, a cartoonist at the time for the San Francisco Chronicle. Graysmith, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, although neither a crime reporter nor a cop, becomes hopelessly obsessed with the case, which nearly ruins his life. It does ruin the lives and careers of some of the people involved in this movie, including one newspaper reporter and some law enforcement officials. All the while, the killer goes free. Zodiac is a fascinating yet frustrating film because it never provides a solid resolution, which is exactly what happened to the Zodiac case itself. It was never solved. There's so much going on in this movie and even more to the case itself, which has a huge following. Significant numbers of people still gather at the crime scenes over 50 years later. People continue to write books on the Zodiac, come up with theories, suspects, potential witnesses, you name it. Zodiac really has become America's Jack the Ripper. But there's so much information out there surrounding these cases, you can easily get bogged down in a quagmire of facts and misinformation. Sometimes it's hard to tell what's what. Now, the director, David Fincher, makes some very interesting directorial decisions with this film, many of which we'll talk about in a few moments. If this was your first time to watch the film, you may have expected something different, especially if you've seen anything else by David Fincher, who directed such films as Fight Club, Seven, Gone Girl, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Panic Room, and others. But in many ways, this is a very different film for Fincher. So my first question is this a film about the Zodiac Killer? Or is it about something else entirely?
Bill B?
Well, I think it's obviously it's about the Zodiac Killer, but I think it's more to do with the people that were involved in trying to solve the case and the obsessions that grew out of that. And I thought it was a wonderful police procedural because it got into the nitty-gritty of all of those things that it takes to work through a case and how they could get so wrapped up into it. It was sort of an anti-Dirty Harry, in that Dirty Harry was about the same subject, essentially, but it had a resolution. You knew who the killer was. The good guy won in the end and all this. And this was real life that was all muddled, never did get a real resolution, never did find out for sure who the killer was and how that affected all of those people that were working on it.
Yeah, great. It's true. Yeah.
I was struck by the, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob, and then Sue.
This is the third time I've seen this movie and the third time I've fallen asleep in it, but not because it's boring. It's just that it really is overwhelming after a while. And what I carry away from this is if you want a peaceful, tranquil, placid life, stay away from the Zodiac investigation, because unless you do, you're going to wind up crazier than a rat in a coffee can, the way everybody else in this movie.
A squirrel in a cage.
Yeah. or a squirrel in a refrigerator.
Sue, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was struck with the obsessions, but it did strike me that in a lot of work that you're dedicated to, and I would have that at my work and analysis, but genealogists are the same type of people. They will hack away at those brick walls and they'll do it for 40 years. And what links into that is that apparently they are looking at DNA now since they have many more tools. Mm-hmm. And so then you look back and say, well, would they have been able to get this guy if they had all the technology tools we have now, or could he have outfoxed them? But it was, I have to say, I was fascinated by it, but I was like you, is it Bob? Mm-hmm. There was a certain point where I said, I can't take any more. My brain is going to explode. I don't care what happens. I got to get out of this. Sorry.
Sue, that's you make a great point about, what would happen now. And we can either touch on that now or later if we want to, but that's a great question. Let's get to some other folks.
Yeah, actually, go ahead, Bill, and then Debbie.
Well, I'm like a lot of the others. I watched it over 2 nights, and I just had a lot of trouble times following it because there were just so many characters, so many pieces of evidence, so many different things. It was like I was having the same problem they were having of following the plot. But I did love the music. The music was wonderful.
Yeah.
It back to my childhood and everything. So that part
great
was
soundtrack.
Great.
Yeah. Debbie?
Oh, I was just going to say that I was really impressed with what they did with the limited technology they had. I mean, this guy was going to the library all the time and finding records in the library that were providing leads. And I was like, aha, before the internet, there was the library.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it was just really amazing. And it was very, very intense. This is the first time I've ever seen the movie, and God, is it intense. And of course, when that woman stops in her car, I'm like, what are you doing? Are you an idiot? So anyway, but yeah, it was, oh man, this was an amazing movie and well written.
Yeah.
I couldn't get over just how well written it was.
Very good pace. Bob?
Yeah.
They have done some DNA evidence in the on the stamps and envelopes that were sent by the Zodiac writer, the guy who had the pieces of the cloth of the taxi driver and so forth. And they don't link up with Arthur Keith Allen either.
Yeah.
So
it's
not a lot that they could do beyond that.
Yeah, that's the one thing I was going to say too, is I was fascinated by just the thinking about this case now and how, the woman with the baby in the car would have known about the Zodiac killer, like the way that information is shared so much that it would have been all over the place. I mean, I laughed out loud when the guy was like, yeah, we don't have a fax. And I was like, oh, yeah. Or he was like, and using a mimeograph instead of, like a copier. And I was like, oh, right. This is a period piece. Let me get back to that. So, but yeah, the idea that all of this technology that we have now, it's very possible that a lot of the things were tainted or that the evidence itself didn't have endurance, so it wouldn't stand up to the kind of tests we have now. But it would be interesting to know, how well this would have, how this would have progressed had it been more current. Yeah. Jim, then Jeff, then
lots
Jim.
of hands.
Jim,
That's
Jeff,
great.
Jim.
Yeah, I was thinking that it might be actually today harder to get a warrant. It was tough enough for them, but today there's a lot more complications in getting a warrant. So that was sort of the big problem there, is able to go at these suspects and getting the physical evidence. It was more of a problem than a technology in a sense.
Right.
And it was a jurisdictional nightmare then. I can't even imagine what it would be like now. And they kind of had some fun with it. I mean, it was almost comical how difficult it was. And you have to wonder if Zodiac knew that it was going to be that way
Probably.
Could have been.
Could have been. Jeff?
Yeah, well, Andy just addressed what I was going to talk about in that each of these jurisdictions seem to have their own files, and there was no communication between them, whereas the information should have been in a pool and everybody had it,
Right.
which would be the case now. It would be just one database and everybody could pull out of it. But back then, well, Viejo's got that. We don't know anything about that. So, yeah, and it was very, very much how backward things were as far as sharing of information then.
Definitely. Okay, Jan, then Chris.
It was a new film to me, so I really enjoyed it. I went in thinking it was just going to be a detective story, and it was that plus the other things that we're talking about. And I have to say, I wasn't expecting it. I thought there'd be some murder, but the two chilling scenes were by the lakeside, and then obviously the basement when he goes down there.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think I've been that scared since Silence of the Lambs in the basement. It was really frightening.
Yeah.
But, I was left thinking, and we can get into that later, what is his motivation to keep going after that? To me, that scene, it was sort of like realizing, okay, you're in too deep here. You could be down there with a killer. That you felt what he was kind of sensing when he's flying like a bat out of hell to get out of that basement. But what was his intense motivation to keep going?
Mhm.
I don't think the film truly addressed that.
That's a great question, Jan, and I want other people to
Yeah,
chime in too.
Let's get to Chris first before we
yeah.
answer that question. Did you
I
have something?
was just going to say real quickly that we know early on in the movie that Graysmith loves to solve puzzles,
Right.
and maybe that's what attracts him to it, or maybe he wants to be the hero to protect his children, or maybe it's something else. But I want to hear your ideas.
Yeah. Chris?
I'm not going to address that, but I just wanted to go back to Jeff's statement that today it would be very different in this communication between agencies. And I don't think that's necessarily true. Look at 9/11, how so much information could have been shared and wasn't, and it still isn't. My other comment was, now I've forgotten what it was.
Sorry.
Let me chime in here on that jurisdictional issue thing. Vince Bugliosi, who prosecuted the Manson murders, spent half of his book trying to resolve questions of jurisdiction between Los Angeles PD and the LA Sheriff's Office. Just those two groups were fighting each other tooth and nail every way. And so when you talk about Vallejo and Contra County and Palo Alto and everywhere else, it was impossible for these guys to talk. So
Yeah. Yeah, that wasn't gonna happen.
Well, and I
So-
think that was the other point I was going to make about this movie, is that unlike most detective movies where everything is clean, we really saw how things how they work in real life.
Definitely.
That
Yeah.
goes on.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So
that's
I
my-
think Debbie had something, and then Bill, and then Wale.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the thing I noticed about him is, at the beginning, nobody takes him very seriously. He's just this cartoonist, and they're calling him all sorts of names. And
Right.
so I had the sense that he was trying to show that he had value. And kind of like the puzzle thing is another part of it. I hadn't thought about that, but he just is a puzzle solver, and he wants to show them that provides value in everything he does. Going to the library and tracking these things down, or gives them a purpose. And I don't know, I thought it was really, he was kind of like the protagonist in a sense, because the story is about how his drive to do this has disrupted so much, and at the same time, he's really trying to accomplish something and show that he has value and has skills. But I just thought it was a fantastic movie, and that was about it, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so you got Bill and then Wale. Bill B.
Yeah, I think Debbie, you make some very good points there. But Jan, I'm so glad you brought that up about the Graysmith character, because that was the biggest single problem I had with the entire work. It was beautifully written. There was, of course, there's a mountain of information that just kept coming at you, so I can see where people might feel overwhelmed by all of this. But I did feel like they didn't get enough into maybe the background of the characters, or there was something a little missing in the script, in the writing. I don't fault the editing or the direction as much about the motivations of some of the characters, and particularly Graysmith, because here we got this really geeky guy who's really into code breaking and puzzle solving and all this kind of thing. But I don't think that went far enough. He got so obsessed that everything went to the back burner for him. It had showed early on in the film that he seemed to be a very caring parent. He was always trying to protect his kids. He was there for them at the bus stop and worrying about, oh, well, what if this guy starts shooting at the buses? And had I thought, a very nice relationship with his new wife. But somewhere along there, he got so obsessed that all of that he forgot about all of that. And I didn't think the screenplay really made that clear. Even though I thought Gyllenhaal did a wonderful job depicting this guy who was both a nerd and kind of removed, but also could show an obsessive quality. So I don't think it was the direction. I don't think it was the acting. There's something in the way that part was written that left me like, they didn't quite explain this.
Okay, Wale, and then Jeff.
I think he was properly set up, in my opinion. The first thing we see is, okay, he might not be exactly completely okay. Maybe he's on the spectrum or something. There's something slightly off about him to start with. And then he leads by saying he just has to know. Right? The first time he's asked, oh, I just have to know. And then he continues on that track. He's kind of like someone who starts a puzzle, maybe a jigsaw puzzle, I don't know. And you start a jigsaw puzzle, it looks all so complex, so daunting. And then you find yourself getting really good at it, getting into it. You're more invested than anybody else. You're making more progress than anybody else, not necessarily because of your talent, but because of your sheer obsession. Your obsession allows you to knock on doors nobody else would knock on. You badger people you never badger. You spend time at places you would never spend time. You ruin dates, ruin marriages. So he had lost so much because of this thing. And now he was, in a sense, at the end of Jigsaw Puzzle, just one more piece, would complete the Jigsaw Puzzle. And then what's standing between him is some dank basement. He's going to take that chance. Like, half of his brain is going to say, run for your life, but the other half is like, you just got to know, So you could, and the movie did a good job of showing that, in my opinion. And about my opinions on the movie generally, one thing that stood out to me was the acting. The acting was top notch all around.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree too. Yeah.
Jeff? Oh, you're muted still.
This was my second time seeing it in about 3 months. And the thing that kind of struck me this time was that, really boiled down, this is a movie about two men who are driven by compulsion. One being obviously Zodiac, and the other one, although it's not evident at first, is Graysmith, and I think the contrast between Graysmith and the other men who are working on the case, like Toshi and Avery, you can see how they are basically worn down by this case, you know, like, and I think Armstrong, the character played by Anthony Edwards, I think at some point he just says, I can't keep devoting my life to this. It's destroying me. And Graysmith goes with it much longer than the others. And I think in that basement, that's maybe the first time that he realizes, like, I'm going to a very dark place here. This is destroying me, this obsession. But that's what I took from this, is it's basically the two guys that are, Zodiac says at one point as well, I'm compelled to kill. I have to, you know, and that's how I really boil this movie down. It's about two men who are driven by a compulsion that they can't control.
Yeah. Jeff, that is a great analysis of it. I think that's very much it. You know, you could say it's two sides of the same coin, because they both have this compulsion and this obsession. Bill, you make a great point about the way that the characters are written, but I think that I see what you're saying, but I think that you get so much of the characters through these great performances, because especially like somebody like Anthony Edwards that doesn't really have that huge a role in it, you can just sense his frustration just by the way he moves around a crime scene, his body language. I think Gyllenhaal really should have at least been nominated for an Oscar for this film. This could have gone so wrong so easily. There's one scene where he's in a bar with Toschi, and he pulls out the code book, and he's leaning over in the restaurant. And I don't know if you noticed it. I didn't notice it the first 3 or 4 times I saw this. And he looks almost like he's just so goofy talking about this code book. And a waiter passes by in front of the camera. And when the waiter's gone, Graysmith is waiting on Toschi to respond to something. It could have just been, he could have looked like a complete goofball, but he doesn't, because Gyllenhaal is so good, and he's so, he's a nerd, you know, he's a goofy cartoonist, but he is so driven. And I think he does such a good job of balancing those. And the others do too. Ruffalo is wonderful. Robert Downey Jr. is great. The cast is just tremendous.
Great cast. Jackie has her hand up in the so go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, Jeff mentioned 2 obsessive characters, but I think the killer is also an obsessed. He's driven. He's obsessed. So maybe the whole movie is about obsession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I felt that what Wale said about, you know, having to find that puzzle, and that last piece of the puzzle, as he said, was looking at the guy and looking him in the eye and deciding if he did it or not. And that moment in the Ace Hardware was just, it was really interesting to see how both of those actors played with their eyes, and just, you know, they emoted a lot in that short little scene. I thought that was a great scene. Mm-hmm. Sue, you had your hand up?
Yes,
There you go.
This reminded me, sort of peripherally, but not so, of a book called The Woman Who Smashed Codes. And it's about Elizabeth Friedman and her husband, I can't remember his first name, who were absolutely top-notch top-notch cyber sleuths. And they did this all day long. It's a long story, it's a fascinating story, but basically they were the founders of the CIA's cybersecurity. But before that, she did South American Nazi, and she said the most difficult people of all cybers was the mafia. They had the most complex cybersecurity, but they were obsessed with cybersecurity. So having read that and been so impressed by these kind of minds that just have to sort this stuff out, I recommend the book to you highly, because it was fabulous. And it's true, it's real. But I see that. And so if someone has that kind of mind, it just draws them in. It's so much more interesting than everyday life and reality.
And I think what at least I got from it too, he had nothing else. So the reporters and the police, you know, this was not their only case. This was not their only story. So for it to take up all of their time, it also detracted from the rest of their jobs. And so they did have to just kind of step back and say, you know what? It's like Tashi said in the restaurant, you know, there are so many more killings that have happened since then, and we need to focus on those too. So I just have to let it go. Whereas Graysmith had nothing else, right? He even got his, I mean, and you were talking, Bill, about his kids and how, you know, he kind of let them go. I thought it was brilliant that they was getting them involved in the investigation. I mean, I know it was kind of creepy, and don't tell your mom about this, but you know, the fact that they were learning how to look up in the almanac and find things. I've kind of had like, oh wow, that's kind of cool. He's getting them involved in analysis in a weird way, but it was still kind of, you know, a way for him to still engage with them, even though he was keeping his obsession going. Jen?
Well, everybody makes good points, and I hadn't considered about him being on the spectrum, but that does ring true. I think this, and not having it, wasn't as involved in the detective workup, so that's a good point. All that makes sense until that phone call, and if that wouldn't do it, the phone calls, that basement experience sure should have finished anybody off. So I'm still back to that point that I would have liked to know a little bit more about the motivation. I even Googled it last night to read about the real character to see if that would explain it, and I didn't get too far. I didn't do extensive research, but that was the only part that was missing. One other little thing, and it could be a legal matter because he wasn't charged, but why is the first survivor being shown a picture so late in the game who he made an identification? Okay, I'd be curious about that. Maybe it's a legal thing because he wasn't.
I'll get to you in a minute while I got Bill.
Yeah, Bill may have it. Yeah.
It sounded to me, because I was having in fact, I backed up in the movie a couple times because I had the same question. Why hadn't he looked at it earlier? But you remember in an earlier scene, it's like they tried to talk to him after he got out of the hospital, and he got himself missing. He just disappeared. And I think at some point he felt like he could face this, and he came back, and it wasn't until 1991. And so you also have to go, well, how well would he remember this guy's face in the dark, et cetera? But it is interesting that he picked that guy, and apparently that's all true. That's part of the original records.
Yeah, there are some things, and you know, you won't be surprised that Fincher took some liberties from, and this is Graysmith's book. I don't know if we have it in the library, but we could get it from ILL. And it's been, do we?
Yeah, I think
it's been a while since I've read it, but I know that when I first saw the movie, there were a few things that didn't ring true with the book. Now, even the book has problems if you look at it now and look at some of the newer evidence that Graysmith got some things wrong in his book too. And that's one of the things about this case. And like you mentioned, Bill, the guy from 1991 making that statement from 22 years earlier, so much changes in the lives of these people, and their memories tell them one thing. And that's one of the frustrating things about this movie. What do you believe?
Right. Wale and then Debbie.
Yeah, I was gonna first talk about him involving his kids in the search. I didn't find that cute in any way. I just felt he had invested so much of himself into it. Think about somebody who's like, maybe you're writing a novel and you get stuck. You know, there's it can take a lot of space in your head. You could either decide, okay, you know what, I'm stuck and I need to throw this thing away and be done with it. Or you can decide, oh, no, I'm going to finish this thing. I'm going to see it to the end. So it gets to a point where he's getting more and more threads in the web to resolve. So he needs to recruit people. And he goes to recruit his kids. That's it. I don't think he was trying to teach them anything. Then back to the obsession thing. I still think the message I got from this movie is obsession is like one of the key ingredients to success, to individual success. Like if somebody's really obsessed about something, the world gets out of their way and they reach their goal, as it were, if they just keep at it. The only problem with obsession is a lot of things have to suffer, you know. So he according to the Wikipedia, he wrote up to 5 such books. Another one of his books was made into another movie. All right, so it wasn't just a puzzle. It wasn't just a jigsaw puzzle for him anymore. It became his life. I was like, okay, this is me now. This is what I do. This is what I have to do. You know, so I think that's what I was.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So Debbie had her hand up, and then I saw Marcy and Jeff threw up something too, and then Bill S.
Well, I was just going to say that when it comes to eyewitness testimony, it's considered one of the least reliable forms of evidence. I mean, most people don't really notice what's going on when something like that is happening to them.
Right.
And the fact that it was in the dark and so many years ago doesn't help at all. So.
Agreed. Marcy?
I just wanted to make a point about Grace Smith using his children as colleagues helping him research information. The children mentioned that one of the deaths occurred in September during the vernal equinox, but the vernal equinox is in the spring.
Yes.
So I think that's just evidence to show that the information that he was getting was probably inaccurate.
You are right. I didn't even
Very
catch that.
good.
Good job. Good job, Marcy. Jeff, and then Bill S.
Well, this goes to the point about the kids working for him as well. And you could read that as saying, well, at least he's finding something that he can bond with the kids about. And
Yeah,
but
it's
I
gross.
think it's more that they were just cheap labor for him at that point. You know, I think he just, you know, they're grunts for him. That's
Yeah.
all I took it to be.
You know, it could also be that the kids were thinking, this is the only way I'm going to connect with Dad.
Right. Right. You saw that them jump up when the television came on, and they like ran right in there and started watching them with him. That's very true. Bill S. Sakura. Oh,
So
you turn your mic off.
Yeah,
You got it.
I turned my mic on.
You got your mic on and your camera off.
Picture off. So he must have made a fair amount of money from this, though. You know, I was wondering when his wife at one point said, you know, just finish it. Was she talking about the book, or was she talking about solve the crime? So, you know, I kind of wondered, you know, was his motivation to write a book at that point and, you know, make something out of what he had done for so long? Or was his motivation to actually solve this crime?
Good question.
Yeah. Maybe both.
Yeah.
I think it was first to solve the crime, definitely to solve the crime, and then publish his findings. Whether it was a book or a press release, that wasn't probably going to be the biggest issue at that point in time.
Right.
But
right.
solving the crime, finding and say, okay, this is the Zodiac, that was his end goal. And I guess his wife was saying, just finish this thing that is eating at you. I can't compete with it. Get it out of your system.
Right. Right. Bob?
I wanted to throw in a counter statement about Downey. I take second place to no one in my respect for the things that he's done over the years. He's an amazing actor, but I thought that he phoned this one in. It was using the bored, tired, arrogant newspaper reporter who knows everything to just kind of walk through these scenes and out the door. I was disappointed with his performance. Gyllenhaal, on the other hand, I always thought this guy, isn't he the brother of a more famous actress? And isn't that Maggie, his sister? Yeah. I thought he got in the door that way. But this guy is a genius. Every movie I've seen him make in the last 10 years has been better than the one before. And I just thought he outshone Downey, who was supposed to be the real star of the show. Ruffalo, I know. Anyway, I would have wanted some more from Downey than what I saw.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because Jackie mentioned Prince of Persia, which, is not one of his better ones.
I think he'd like to forget that one.
We all would.
So here's
Yeah.
here's something that in interviews, David Fincher has said that he's not really interested in any movie that he makes as far as entertainment value, but rather, and this is a quote, "I'm always interested in movies that scar." What do you think he means by that? Yeah, and you can see that in other movies too. Seven, Fight Club. So what do you think he's referring to? I mean, is it just literal or physical, emotional?
Well, and then Bill?
I think my first Fincher movie was Seven. I think, and that movie, I think that's the movie that has disturbed me the most ever. I mean, I've seen horror movies that, like as a kid or as a younger adult, that scared me, and I was scared of the dark for that night. But this movie, it wasn't a horror movie, but it made me think. It made me ponder the human condition. I was disturbed. I couldn't sleep that night, basically, just thinking about how the human mind works. So, mission accomplished, Fincher, right? So he's basically saying, I don't just want to make movies that you enjoy watching. I want to make a movie that makes you think, and makes you take notes, makes you sit up, make you ask questions, make you discuss, and I think it's a noble goal. My caveat is, don't go thinking that kind of movie is superior to a movie that is purely for entertainment. I believe they all have their value. If, like Fincher, you can deliver the entertainment in spades, and you're not just making a movie that just depresses people from beginning to end, then good on you.
Yeah. Excellent
Unless the
points.
acting,
Excellent.
and some of the acting in some of his movies were depressing from beginning to end, but not this one. Bill B. and then Jeff.
Yeah, Whale, I think you're really onto something there. I agree with both you and Andy that Fincher's work, at least what I've seen of it, really does leave a mark, so to speak. It's like he's really trying to get at the insides and the ambiguity of the human condition, and he's not afraid to go really dark. And as you said, in Seven and Panic Room, and and Fight Club. And Fight Club I've seen it 3 times now, and it's psychologically, it's a mind-blowing movie, particularly since it becomes an entirely different movie when you get about 3/4 of the way through it and find out what's all really in his head. So I think this is very much where Fincher is coming from. And I read someplace too that this particular film, unlike his others, was like he has a particular affinity to the Zodiac case, sort of like James Cameron's obsession with Titanic. So he spent years and years being really himself obsessed with this case. And I think he was just raring to make a movie about it and wanted to do one that was straight up and down real and muddled, et cetera, and like I said earlier, sort of the anti-Dirty Harry or anti-Bullet, which again is so interesting because that character that Ruffalo played was apparently the inspiration for the Bullet character, and also to a certain extent for the Dirty Harry character. And and speaking earlier of that thing that I had about the writing about the Graysmith character, it brings to mind, I've got a little bit about that with the Ruffalo character as well, because when I was reading about the real guy who was so flamboyant, et cetera, that inspired the Bullet and the Dirty Harry stuff. You don't really see that so much in the Ruffalo character. And it's really a shocking surprise 2/3 of the way through the movie when you find out he wrote these couple of letters into Maupin and then was suspected of forging a Zodiac letter, because the Ruffalo character did not come across like that to me through the rest of the picture. So I'm wondering again if there was a little bit of a hole in the writing there.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, Bill, but that's very good.
Yeah, and Jeff?
Yeah, just to follow up on about the David Fincher filmography. I think the first thing of his I saw was Alien 3, which was well done, but I thought it was kind of lacking for the Alien series. 7 is a strange movie for me because I saw it many years ago. I will admit that it's well done. It's very effective, but under no circumstances do I ever want to see that movie again. I don't want to see it again, never. And Fight Club, in somewhat lesser so, is the same way, you know, and it pulls you in, and it doesn't give you the release at the end. You know, it pulls you down there and then it holds you there. And I can take my hat off to him because he's an effective filmmaker, but like I said, I don't always want to see that stuff again.
Yeah, I'd agree. Especially, I didn't realize he had done Gone Girl. And I think of all the movies that I've seen that I read the book first, I was a little disappointed in the movie itself in its relation to it. But I felt like the movie was okay as a, you know, like if I took it apart and just looked at the movie, but he dwells on that, like, that obsession theme and that compulsion theme in a lot of his movies, and the looking at, you know, like opening wounds and trying to get you to look a little deeper into somebody, and not just because they're crazy, but maybe because their crazy is a little too real. And that's kind of what I felt in this movie too. Like, it was just, okay, yeah, his obsession was a little much, but it was also a little too, I mean, he portrayed it very well. And it makes me wonder what Grace Smith is like in person now, you know, like as a real person. And his obsession with this is kind of, well, I didn't know if your hand was up from before or if that's a new hand. Okay.
Okay. So.
Jan, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Oh, did Jan, do you have something? Okay.
I was just going to say, maybe the scarring comment was, you know, particularly at this time of year, I really love classic horror movies. I spend a lot of October looking at. But when I get right down and now analyze what really can be scary in movies, this movie was scary. I thought that lakeside scene was scary because I could see myself in that scene where you see somebody coming up. Is something going to happen? No, it's okay. Oh my God, he's coming. That's scary because that was really real life to me. That woman being broken down on the side of the road. Well, actually, he told her she was going to break down, and then he did break her down. But that was scary. What do you do in the middle of the night when your car is not, well, before the era of cell phones?
Right.
And of course, the infamous basement. So maybe that's the scarring comment, because that's what really makes an impact on me rather than Bela Lugosi and Dracula. You know what I mean? That's really scary because you could see yourself being in a situation that got out of hand and you're with a crazy person now.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things that really I didn't notice until I watched it this time is, you know, this movie's almost 3 hours long.
Right.
And all of the killings take place in the first 25 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you do have that car scene that we talked about that comes later in the film, but so much of the film doesn't have anything to do with the killings themselves. And, you know, in so many movies about killers, in the final act, the killers are usually caught or killed or brought to justice. That doesn't happen in Zodiac. And the closest we get to a resolution in this movie is having Graysmith staring into Arthur Lee Allen's eyes for a few seconds and then moving forward in his disruptive life. How do you feel about that ending?
I don't know about you, but I felt fine about it until I read the credits. Because I was like, okay, they're going to, you know, like in my head, I did, well, they didn't show him getting the guy and going to jail, but that clearly is like the next step, and that's what's going to happen. And then I find out that they didn't, and that it's still open, you know, because he died before they could even question him again. It's like, okay, talk about, you know, a dream unfulfilled. You really felt like you were going to get to the bottom of this, and it's still an open case.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that to me was like, oh, okay. He
Yeah.
got what he needed. He got what he needed because that's what he wanted to do. See the guy, and now that we know this, maybe you know, and we've got the ID, how flimsy it is, you know, whatever. We'll get to a resolution.
And that's the thing too. If you read the book and do a little bit more research, if you want to, and I would totally understand if you didn't want to. There are a lot of experts that think Arthur Lee Allen's not the guy.
Yeah.
He was a weird guy. He did some weird things. He had a lot of things in common with the Zodiac, but there's a lot of experts that say he is not the guy.
It was the guy flushing the toilet, wasn't it?
It was the guy flushing the toilet. So
it was
yeah,
the guy upstairs.
It was the guy upstairs.
Bob. Yeah, go ahead, Bob and Wally. I'm sorry, I'll get back to you too.
The evidence suggesting Arthur Lee Allen is, as Graysmith, who this movie was based on his book or books, wants to be compelling, but it isn't, because the only fingerprint they ever had of anything is not Arthur Lee Allen's. Exactly. And the handwriting by every expert who has looked at this says that the handwriting on these verified Zodiac notes are not that of Arthur Lee Allen. He was not the guy as much as we want to believe it. And so I think this movie had a perfect ending, saying, look, this is just like life. Yeah. You suffer a lot and then you die.
And that's a hard lesson.
Well,
but it's the truth.
Yeah, yeah.
I was just going to follow up on Jan's comments about horror and what really is scary. And I agree, the things that can happen in real life tend to scare me more as an adult in movies. I've never, ever been scared of Jaws. Jaws has never scared me because I'm not going to be in the middle of an ocean. You know, if I'm watching the movie while on a boat, then maybe I'll be scared of Jaws. But right now in my basement, there's just no way a shark is going to scare me. Yeah. But this movie, I think I avoided this movie for a long time because in my mind, the Zodiac killer could still be out there. You know, that was my mindset. Like, how do you know he's not out there? You know, some 90-year-old with a chainsaw in his trunk or something, you know. So those kind of movies scare the living daylight out of me. And I suspect without this prompt, I may not have seen the movie. But I'm glad I did because I got to see that, okay, it wasn't as if the cops were just completely clueless, you know. They got close enough to, should I say, scare the Zodiac into not continuing to just kill and kill and kill and kill. You know, he would sense them coming close to him and then back off, you know, in a sense. But to compound that is the idea that there might be copycat killers out there. I heard that there's some people out there claiming that the Zodiac was their dad, or, you know, so it might inspire some other crazy people. And those are the kind of things that scare me the most, the things that show how crazy the human mind can be. You know, that's why Seven really, really stayed with me for a long time.
All right. Yeah.
Very good.
Well, I just wanted to bring up a point we haven't really discussed either, and that's when they decide to make the crime public, and you can see the detectives just saying, "Oh, well, here we go," and every crackpot in the world comes out of the woodwork for that, which made their job so much harder.
Mhm.
I understand why they thought they needed to do it, but from the police's point of view, it just made it impossible.
Mhm.
It really did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that also compounds with the problem because then I actually thought that the killing by the lake was a copycat because, it seemed like the way that he was approaching them in a way, and he had the mask and a shirt with the symbol on it. I thought that had to be something that was, a stage. And then he stabbed them instead of shot them, right? So as he was changing, I kept thinking, well, maybe there were multiple killers. And maybe just like Graysmith was saying as he was coming from the basement, two killers, it still could have been multiple people out there doing, or whether it was copycat or if it was coordinated, it definitely seemed like it could have been a number of people.
Yeah.
Is that you, Bill? Yeah, go
Sure.
ahead, Bill. And then Bob. Oop, unmute.
So
There you go.
I'm
Hold on a
wondering,
second.
it didn't seem like the feds ever got involved in this. Where was the FBI? Where was the serial killer investigation? Where's the Mindhunters? I know this was a little bit before their time, but you never saw the feds get involved, and they would have been able to cross jurisdictions.
They did have.
I thought the DOJ was
just
involved.
curious.
Yes.
Yeah, the
There was no-
DOJ was involved.
The FBI had no jurisdiction in there. It was non-interstate crime. This happened solely in the state of California.
Right.
So there's no federal issue whatsoever. Oh, hell, I've forgotten the other point that I was trying to make. Sorry.
We'll get back to it.
back
That's
to it.
okay. Wale?
To get back to Darnice's point about multiple killers, even the movie had different actors play Zodiac.
Mhm.
So the first
did.
two killings were by the same actor, and then I think the guy in the car was a different person. So even though we don't see their faces, somehow I guess Fincher is agreeing maybe that they're different people doing the killings.
Well,
Did you
and I think-
remember, Bob?
And I
Oh,
think
go ahead,
too
Jeff.
that, I think too, Wale, that's just to put some doubt in our minds as well.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Zodiac claimed at the end that he had killed 37 people. I think they have 4 that they know about where he actually sent them evidence like the taxi driver's shirt and so forth. So we don't really know how much of this was just original psycho stuff or copycat. And I think the police may have been very, very, very astute in saying, the more you advertise this, the more you're going to see of it. And as soon as the newspapers started to downplay airplane hijacking back in the 60s, the fewer hijackings we saw.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
I ran across in my research that several law enforcement officials and even homicide detectives have stated that Zodiac is the most accurate portrayal of policemen at work that's ever been put on film. If that's true, what surprised you about the police work in this film?
Oh, sorry, Bill, and then Debbie.
I don't know about surprised me, but I totally agree with that statement because there was such there was so much detail about the way they did everything, the way they set up the newsroom, the fact that the newsroom would often be empty and big. It had a lot of the same feel as All the President's Men in terms of being a procedural and being here we go, step 1, step 2, step 3. Here are all of the things that we go through, and here are all the missteps and all of the rabbit holes we go down, and we come back and we just persevere and we keep going. One of the scenes that impressed me the most was, and we sort of talked about it earlier, and it's only 2 or 3 minutes long, but it was when Bill Armstrong was on the phone to both Vallejo and Napa, and he's going, well, we need a copy of the print. Oh, well, no, we need a copy of this or that. He says, well, we already sent it. Oh, well, no, we haven't got it yet. Oh, no, you sent it to Vallejo, but you didn't send it to Napa. Well, I'll fax it to you. Oh, we haven't got teletype. I mean, and it was just so, it felt so real. So they were struggling with that technology, but they were also, it showed that tightrope that still gets done between, obviously on a number of levels, they wanted to cooperate one another. They wanted to solve this case, but there was still kind of these little turf wars going on under the surface where, like, well, I'm not going to give you this unless you give me that. And that was just fascinating to me. So yeah, I totally agree. I think it was really eye-opening how well they depicted, at least it seemed to me, how well they depicted what really happens in those kinds of situations.
Yeah, definitely. Debbie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I wasn't so much surprised as I was incredibly impressed with the amount of work and care and attention the police have to give to actually solve a crime. I mean, and I know this because I used to practice law and I know something about criminal procedure, and my God, these police were made to look very, very careful. There's nothing dirty, hairy about these guys. I mean, Ruffalo was like, at one point, I was a little bit surprised when he said, oh, that's just all circumstantial, to something that Gyllenhaal had mentioned. And I was like, geez, what do you need for probable cause?
Yeah, exactly.
Reasonable suspicion, anything, good Lord. But, it's tough to make a case. That's what it comes down to. And it's tough to know when you have enough to get a warrant and to actually make it stick, all those things.
Right.
I don't envy the police or prosecutors who have to bring these cases.
And you can certainly see how after an obsession or, the frustration with a case, why you hear so many things about evidence being planted or evidence going missing, or, a lot of the things that are marks against the police. But you can certainly see something like this, why I just need to solve this case no matter what.
It's tough.
Bob, and then Jan.
The short scene that I thought was the best example of how police interact with each other was when Ruffalo was questioning the 2 beat cops who had seen a suspect walking away from the taxi shooting.
Oh, yeah.
And he's saying, you saw a guy walking away 50 yards from a shooting that had just been called in, and you didn't stop him. And they said, but it was a call for a black male, and this was a white male. But he was 50 yards and 30 seconds away from the scene of the crime. And he said, but he was a black male. And he said, they corrected the call, but it was
too late. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Jan?
I was just thinking when we were just a minute ago when we were talking about the reality of it, the frustration too. Remember the lead detective, or I don't remember what exactly was titled, when they thought they had the character, and he goes, I thought it was him too, it's not him. Remember? And he was talking them down. I think they were on a stairway. They all wanted it to be him. They didn't have enough evidence. He goes, it's not him.
Right.
You could feel that. Yeah, I'm in it too. I'm as frustrated with it. So it must be really hard. I know nothing about this world, but it must be very hard, especially when you got somebody who's well, that could have been him, but a wackadoo with squirrels running around and, pedophile, and it's gotta be him, right?
Gotta be him.
know,
We just gotta make everything that's evil about this person.
Right.
Let's just make it as crazy as
Yeah,
possible.
yeah.
It's
No,
gotta be him.
it's not him, right? And I saw that there were a lot of rumors that people thought maybe Graysmith was the Zodiac killer, right? And that there were other people that were in the story that they thought might have been behind it. So you just never know. You just never know.
All right. Well, this has been great. To be honest, I didn't think you guys would be into this movie as much as you are. So this is great.
You
So,
pick very discussable movies.
yeah.
And sometimes the discussions don't go the way we think.
Yeah. I had like tons of questions, and you guys got a lot of them before I could get to them. So that's great. So yeah, we're a little bit over, but that's okay. Anybody got any last words before we get on to recommendations? Bill?
Bill?
Yeah, there was just one scene that, as Jan brought up earlier, that was really impressive to me, and that was when Gyllenhaal went over to the cinema programmer and in the basement, and the sheer terror of that without anything happening. It was completely a red herring, but it was set up so beautifully in terms of the tension is palpable. And it really reminded me, I'm not sure how many of you have seen it, but Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, when the Brad Pitt character went to the Manson farm, and there was a 10-minute sequence there where you thought, oh, this is going to be horrible and it's going to be tremendous Tarantino bloodshed going on here. And it was a red herring. But the tension was palpable. So I think Fincher is a great director. I mean, he just does amazing things with setups like that.
Agree. Totally agree. Okay, well, let's get into some recommendations. I've already mentioned before on a previous program, The Conversation from 1974 with Gene Hackman, which we saw at the library last year and is on Canopy now. A movie we have not shown at the library is called Blow Up, about a photographer who believes he unintentionally took a photograph of a murderer. So that film is on DVD in the library. But I really want to highlight 3 other films, although those 2 are great films. First is a film that we don't have on DVD at the library yet, but we will, because it's coming out from Criterion in early 2021. And we'll get it, but don't try to put a hold on it just yet. It's a Korean film called Memories of Murder from 2003. And like Zodiac, it's about a police investigation to track down a serial killer in Korea. Now, it's directed by Bong Joon-ho, who also directed last year's Best Picture winner, Parasite. So if you liked that movie, you're really going to like Memories of Murder. And if you liked Zodiac too, they're very, very similar, but with a lot of significant differences. So next, if you want more Jake Gyllenhaal, and who doesn't, check out a movie on Canopy called Enemy. And I think I may have recommended this one before.
You did, yeah.
Gyllenhaal plays a quiet, reserved college professor who discovers a man who looks exactly like him. This has one of the strangest endings of any film I've ever seen, but it's definitely worth checking out. It's directed by Denis Villeneuve, who also directed Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, and the upcoming remake of Dune. But for my money, I think maybe the greatest serial killer movie of all time. You have to go all the way back to 1931 for M, directed by Fritz Lang, the film that launched the career of Peter Lorre, who gives a superb performance. It is amazing. So if you want the suspense without the graphic violence, you really have to see M. It is a cornerstone film. If you're a movie fan, and you all are, and you haven't seen M, you should see it. So,
and that's on Canopy.
That's on Canopy, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So you're
Sue?
Can you give me that name again? I missed it.
Which one?
M?
Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre.
Yeah, Peter Lorre.
M.
Yeah.
The letter
M.
M.
Just the letter
Oh,
M.
oh, right. Okay, great.
Yeah. Bob's got it.
If you want to see a movie that's even more disturbing than this one we just saw, another Denis Villeneuve is Prisoners. No student of psychopathy would want to miss that movie.
I've got to see that one, Bob. That's one of his movies I have not seen, but it's on my list. So I'm glad you mentioned it. Yeah. Jan, you have something?
You just muted yourself.
Jan, you're muted.
Jan, you're muted. Jan, you're muted. We didn't hear any of that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, after all this and October spooky movies, we're going to be ready for Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland doing a parade or something. Jeez. We need some light.
We'll get a Shirley Temple movie out. How about
Exactly.
that?
Oh, gosh. Let's not go there. Jeff, I think you said you had some recommendations too. What you got? Oh, you're muted. You're muted. Nope. Still muted.
Still muted, Jeff.
Sorry. Yeah, Bill had mentioned, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill had mentioned Mindhunter, which is playing on Netflix. There's 2 seasons of it, and I'd certainly recommend that because it very much dovetails with what Zodiac's about. It's about the FBI and their investigation of serial killers.
Yeah.
And it's got some amazing performances by various actors as some of the various serial killers, such as Manson, such as David Berkowitz, Richard Speck, guys like that. The guy that plays Manson is actually the same guy who played him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I definitely recommend that. And the other one is this book, if you can read it. It's called The Most Dangerous Animal of All.
Oh.
And it's written by a guy named Gary L. Stewart, who was a fellow who, as a baby, was abandoned in a stairwell in Louisiana. And in tracking down who his biological father is, this is actually a true story, comes to realize or think that his father was the Zodiac killer. And it's funny because this guy is very much in the same vein of someone who gets on something and is obsessed with it. So, and I think it was actually made into a mini series on FX within the last year as well. So look that up as well. It's called The Most Dangerous Animal of All. Gary L. Stewart is the writer.
Yeah, great.
That reminds me.
Thanks, Jeff.
If the Most Dangerous Game is anywhere, the movie that they've been talking about.
Oh yeah, that's another one. If you haven't seen The Most Dangerous Game,
Yeah,
I thought it was on
1932.
Canopy.
Right.
Is it? Okay.
I thought
And
it
I think I
was.
saw it on Amazon.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. Creepier now that you've seen Zodiac, but it's still creepy enough.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I've lost the microphone.
Nope, you didn't need to lose the microphone. We
Okay.
can hear you.
Yeah, Marcy, do you have one?
I just wanted to say that the book that Jeff just recommended, The Most Dangerous Animal of All, is at the library.
Okay,
So
great.
if anyone wants to check it out. I don't know if that was mentioned.
No, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, I may check it out tomorrow.
I don't know. I think I need a break. Like Jan said, I think I need a break from this. It's a little too much. Although Wale has made me want to go back and watch 7 again. I have watched that several times. I don't know why. I mean, I now skip over the parts that I know are the gross parts because, it's just too much. But, what's in the box is a favorite quote of ours in this house anyway. So.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining me tonight. And I hope you can join me Monday night as well. If you haven't seen that movie, it's a very quiet little movie, but there's a lot of great stuff going on in that film. It's called Here and There from 2012 on Canopy. And then please send your questions for Todd Hitchcock. Get those things rolling in. I know you got questions, so send them in.
Yeah, send them in.
All right.
Tell all your friends to send them in too.
Thanks again, especially for the first timers. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for
do
coming
come
back.
Okay.
All right. Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Night.
Good
Good
night.
night.